අලුතෙන් SLT Mobitel Home 4G LTE connection ගන්න අයට වටිනා tab computers සහ data දීමනා. අලුතෙන් SLT Mobitel Home 4G LTE connection ගන්න අයට වටිනා tab computers සහ data දීමනා.
පෑස් සවන් බිලිඳු සම්ට විශේෂයෙන්ම නිෂ්පාදිතයි. SLS ප්‍රමිතිසාධකය සහිතයි.
Inflows and outflows. The central bank raises rates as the governor outlines Sri Lanka's current problem.
But if you go to the IMF, there can be even worse arrangements that will be looked at.
Going beyond. The joint chambers of commerce issue demands, including a floating rupee and IMF help. But experts say it's not enough.
The crisis is also an important opportunity for the electricity board and the petroleum corporation.
Action plan. The fisheries minister pledges to increase inland fisheries to 30% by 2025.
Action has already been initiated to establish similar 19 export villages consisting of 467 farms in total in Jaffna district.
All that and much more coming up on First at 9. This Friday, the 4th of March, 2022.
සියක් දක්වා ඉස්සොරින් නැති 100ක් සුසිනිඳු කෙස් කලමක් ලබා දේ. Dove Anti-Dandruff.
From AdaDerana, this is AdaDerana First at 9. Live from Studio 24 in Colombo.
Good evening. Welcome to First at 9. I'm Dhammik Ekanayake. Now, after announcing a 100 basis point rate hike today, Central Bank Governor Ajit Cabral warned that despite growing calls for International Monetary Fund assistance, we should be careful about what we wish for. He explained that although the central bank's 8-point list of recommendations to the government may seem a bit harsh, any moves towards the IMF could result in more hardships for the people.
The central bank at its monetary policy review meeting yesterday has decided to raise both lending and deposit rates by 100 basis points after carefully considering current and expected global and local macroeconomic developments. Accordingly, the standing deposit facility rate will be 6.5% and the standing lending facility rate 7.5%. The statutory reserve ratio, meanwhile, remains unchanged at 4%. In addition, the board also revised interest rate caps on credit cards to 20% per annum, pre-arranged temporary overdrafts to 18% per annum, and pawning facilities to 12% per annum. In addition, the central bank has issued an 8-point list of measures for the government to consider. It includes measures to discourage non-essential and non-urgent imports urgently based on previous recommendations made by the central bank, increasing fuel prices and electricity tariffs immediately to better reflect costs, incentivizing foreign remittances and investments further, implementing energy conservation measures while accelerating the move towards renewable energy, increasing government revenue through suitable tax increases on a sustained basis, mobilizing foreign financing and non-debt forex inflows on an urgent basis, monetizing non-strategic and underutilized assets, and postponing non-essential and non-urgent capital projects. Speaking at the media briefing this morning, Central Bank Governor Ajit Cabral explained that given current circumstances, Sri Lanka needs a further tightening of fiscal measures.
We believe that there is a further tightening necessary, and that tightening has to come in several forms, and not all would be through the actions of the central bank. That's why we have done a policy interest rate hike of 100 basis points, which is one of the higher range of policy interest rate increases in the last 15 or 20 years.
Meanwhile, during the subsequent Q&A session, the governor was questioned on the progress of the roadmap that he presented at the start of his tenure that outlined a host of new inflows that could go some ways in helping the country's reserve position. However, the governor explained that what Sri Lanka has been facing is not in actuality a dearth of inflows, but quite the opposite.
We have not had a dearth of inflows. We have had an increase in our outflows. If you look at the figures, I have given that regularly. Although people don't want to talk about that, there has been immense increase in those numbers. The import figures in 2021 has been one of the highest. If you take some of the non-essential imports also, those have been increased. So therefore, we are concerned about that numbers, and that's why we have requested certain changes to be made for that. In any plan, I know sometimes plans are not made, but when plans are made, people can criticize those. But at the same time, if you don't have a plan, then where are you going? So that's why we have very clearly set out a plan. We have pursued the plan. But in going through with the plan, there will be certain challenges that will occur. Would any one of you have thought that there would be a Russia-Ukraine war, which would have led to the oil prices going up to $117? At the time that we did the roadmap, we certainly didn't think that would happen. If anyone else had thought, I would have appreciated if they could have told us that. But that is the way of the world. There would be certain situations like that. I don't think anyone really assessed that the US would have a inflation rate which is the highest in 40 years, or that UK would have a inflation at the 30-year high. So these are all conditions that are dynamic. And when you have dynamic conditions, we would take certain steps to deal with that. And so far, although there have been some very, very significant challenges, we have been able to move forward with stability. But going forward, we need further steps. That's why today we have increased the interest rates. We think that is the way to go.
The governor was then asked to explain the difference between the contents of the central bank's latest recommendations and the IMF's own that were issued mere days ago.
So if you can ask them, they'll probably tell you more. So we are saying do this, and we are asking people also that there would be certain measures that will be tough. Not totally tough, but if you go to the IMF, there can be even worse arrangements that will be looked at. So then those will have to be done. So would you prefer the IMF telling that or the central bank saying that? Which one?
Following this, Governor Cabral was also questioned about the IMF's labelling of Sri Lanka's debt situation as unsustainable and what his response to it would be. He explained that the IMF should have, in hindsight, had a bigger say when the country went on a borrowing spree during the 2016 to 2019 period in the midst of an IMF program.
That comment has been done by so many people. But the last 2 years that have been said. And at the time that these loans were taken, IMF was there. IMF was in a program with Sri Lanka from 2016 to 2019. It is during that period that Sri Lanka's international sovereign bonds increased from 5 billion to 15 billion. So if at all there was going to be any discussion as to the unsustainability, that discussion should have taken place at that time. The current situation with regard to COVID as well as reduction of tourism receipts have put some vulnerability. And then there could be some difficulty that we are facing. That is why you sometimes see certain challenges. But going forward, we are taking certain steps to deal with that as well. So I believe that with those steps, we will be bringing back Sri Lanka's debt to more sustainable levels.
Further, the governor also denied that the Sri Lankan government had approached its debtors for a restructuring program.
We have not requested a restructuring of debt from China. We have requested China as well as some others to offer certain loans in the policy package that we have announced in the past as well, where we have said that we are shifting the loans from commercial loans to that of government to government as well as to swaps arrangements.
Meanwhile, also touching on concerns raised by the pharmaceutical industry this week on the dearth of US dollars to import essential drugs, the governor said that it was disheartening that non-essentials were still taking precedence over essentials.
As you know, although the pharmaceutical industry says that, I don't think you have heard anyone saying that they have a shortage of television sets or dishwashers or apples or oranges. So if those people can be importing those and having it freely available in the supermarkets, and new supermarkets are also opened on a regular basis to have these items stocked up, it is somewhat disheartening to see that drugs are not included in that list.
Now then, the Joint Chambers of Commerce have made several demands from the government, including making the exchange rate more flexible and restructuring of the country's foreign debt. What's more, they also want the government to rethink about going to the International Monetary Fund. With there being disruptions to the fuel and electricity supplies as a direct result of troubles in sourcing forex, one expert believes that measures to arrest the situation should go beyond what the chambers have proposed.
The Joint Chamber of Commerce had met yesterday to discuss the prevailing forex issues in Sri Lanka and its impact on business activity as well as the economy. They are of the view that the prevailing fuel supply disruption and power interruptions are affecting all sectors of the economy. Further, they also highlight what they call a significant shortage of raw material inputs needed for domestic and export production and the inability to pay suppliers on time. The Joint Chamber of Commerce expresses concern that the prevailing situation would reverse some of the gains seen recently in the tourism and export sectors. Concerns are also expressed on the livelihoods of the people in the SME sector as well as the daily wage earners being disrupted. In this backdrop, the 9 chambers demand that the government establish a market-driven pricing formula for fuel, gas and electricity, while also allowing flexibility on the exchange rate. They say that it is better to manage a situation of cost escalations compared to the present shortage of essential items, including foreign exchange. The next demand is that the immediate commencement of a preemptive foreign debt restructuring process in an orderly manner, involving both commercial and non-commercial debt. The chambers say that this process will soon provide breathing space to allocate the scarce dollars towards essential imports such as fuel and medicines. The Joint Chambers of Commerce also calls on the government to seek the support of the International Monetary Fund and formulate a reform program that they say would provide confidence to the market and the private sector with immediate effect. One particular expert believes that action should go beyond what's proposed by the chambers.
Going beyond and above these proposals, and also we should look at why we are at this kind of a crisis, and then how do we get out of this crisis in medium term and long term basis. And this is also important when we negotiate with the IMF. IMF will not impose conditions, but they require a program of action on our part. We have borrowed and invested and consumed and used for some other purposes. However, without adequate source of foreign exchange earnings, which means actually we need to focus more on exports and investment to get out of this problem on long-term basis. In fact, the crisis is also an important opportunity even for the electricity board and the petroleum corporation to restructure these public state-owned enterprises, even to invite the private sector to take part in these businesses of electricity generation, electricity transmission and distribution, as well as fuel supply and all other energy industries.
It is well documented that Sri Lanka requires around $500 million to source fuel, including power generation. That is roughly half of the foreign exchange the island manages to secure via exports per month. The government has been in talks with India to secure a $500 million fuel credit line. The Indian Oil Corporation says that under the facility, it will supply 12 to 13 parcels of fuel to Sri Lanka over the next 4 to 5 months against a tender issued by the Ceylon Petroleum Corporation under the said Indian line of credit.
ලබන මාර්තු 18 වෙනිදා ඉඳලා ඉන්දියානු ක්‍රෙඩිට් ලයින් එන තෙල් ටික එනවා. එතකොට අපිට අප්‍රේල් මැයි වෙනකන් ඒ තෙල් ටික ඇති. ඊළඟට අපි කල්පනා කරන්න ඕනේ පිරිපහදුව නැවතවරක් ආරම්භ කළා පිරිපහදුවේ 150ක ධාරිතාව 100ක ධාරිතාවට ගත්තොත් රටේ තෙල් ප්‍රශ්නට විසඳෙනවා. ඒකට තියෙන ප්‍රධාන ප්‍රශ්නේ කොහොමද පිරිපහදුවට කූඩ් ලබා ගන්නේ. ඒක අපි රජයත් එක්ක කතා කරලා නැත්නම් ජාත්‍යන්තරත් එක්ක කතා කරලා ඒ ප්‍රශ්නේ විසඳ ගන්න ඕනේ.
With people queuing up at pumps for fuel, a tanker with 28,300 metric tons of diesel and 9,000 metric tons of jet fuel reached the island this morning. The energy minister says it paid $39.3 million for the 2 consignments and they will be unloaded tomorrow morning. The ministry added that 37,300 metric tons of diesel consignment, which was at the Colombo port, is also being unloaded, and the process is at its final stage. In any case, the government has vowed to enter their planned interruptions to power supply from tomorrow onwards.
The Public Utilities Commission of Sri Lanka has approved the request made by the Ceylon Electricity Board for its power shedding schedule proposed over the weekend. As such, the areas mentioned under the groups P, Q, R, S, T, U, V and W will experience 3-hour power cuts between 8:30 a.m. and 5:30 p.m. during the day. Further, the electricity supply for these areas will be interrupted once again between 6 p.m. and 10 p.m. for 1 hour. Meanwhile, areas mentioned under groups E and F will experience power interruptions of 7 hours between 8:30 a.m. and 10:30 p.m. on Saturday. Power interruptions to these areas will take place in 2 stages, with 4 hours during the day between 8:30 a.m. and 4:30 p.m. and 3 hours later in the day. On Sunday, the power supply will be interrupted for 2 hours and 30 minutes between 9 a.m. and 4:30 p.m. only for areas mentioned under the groups A, B and C. Meanwhile, the PUCSL also announced that the power shedding will also take place in Colombo with immediate effect. We'll see you shortly. Stay with us.
Big 3.
Welcome back. This is First at 9. Now, Minister of Fisheries Douglas Devananda says that the strategy of his ministry is to raise inland fishery products to 30% by 2025 as a measure to deal with the issue of overfishing and illegal fishing activities carried out by Indian fishermen. The minister made this remark during the launch of the World Bank report on the island's fisheries sector.
A report published by the World Bank has put the spotlight on the need for the country's fisheries sector to be sustainable in order to better livelihoods and generate better revenue. According to it, about half of the Indian Ocean yellowfin tuna catch, which is a significant contributor to the country's export revenue, is usually spoiled by the time the fishermen make it to the shore, owing to the lack of refrigerator facilities aboard multi-day boats that spend close to 5 weeks at sea. This, however, is rather common to all multi-day fishing trawlers that set out to sea. As such, the World Bank is of the view that spoilage could be reduced through a combination of fleet modernization, improved handling of fish, and enhanced logistical arrangements to reduce time spent at sea without increasing the overall catch. The report, prepared in close cooperation with the Ministry of Fisheries, titled Priorities for Sustainably Managing Sri Lanka's Marine Fisheries, Coastal Aquaculture, and the Ecosystems that Support Them, was launched yesterday. Speaking at the event, the Minister of Fisheries gave an update on the progress his ministry has made with regard to the development of the sector.
Regulations have been introduced to ensure seafood traceability, and we have introduced, my ministry has drawn up plans to increase the inland fisheries, which is contributing to about 17% of the total fishery products at present to about 30% by the end of 2025. My ministry has also embarked on coastal aquaculture aimed. We have established sea cucumber export villages. 355 such farms have already been established in Kilinochchi clusters into 6 export villages. Action has already been initiated to establish similar 19 export villages clusters consisting of 467 farms in total in Jaffna district. We have also pursued actions to provide bank loan facility of 5 million, which the interest subsidy of 4.5% by the government to each of 600 prawn farms owners in modernize their ponds. We are also promoting cage culturing of mud crab, which has a high export potential, and sea bass. I would like to request the World Bank to explore the possibilities of provide technical and financial assistance for the following needs. To provide 50% subsidy to purchase multi-day boats by the fishermen of North. Due to the prolonged war, the northern fishermen have not gone beyond traditional fishing method. The ADB, which has taken all the initiative to grant loan to put up multi-day boat harbour in Point Petro, is now reluctant to go ahead with this project, as there is hardly any fishermen in the north owning multi-day fishing vessels. For the multi-day boat owners to purchase mothership to collectively transport their catches in the high seas so that those vessels could stay in the sea for longer period of time. Assistance to install solar power to the existing multi-fishing vessels with a view to reduce their running cost.
Moving on with other local stories, the petitions filed against the transfer of Kerawalapitiya Yugadanivi power plant shares to the US company New Fortress Energy were taken up today before the Supreme Court. The 5-member bench, however, refused to grant leave to proceed with all 5 petitions. The bench consisted of Chief Justice Jayanta Jayasuriya and Justices Bhuvaneka Aluwihara, Priyantha Jayawardena, Vijit Malalgoda and LTB Dehidenya. The petitioners included Venerable L.A. Gunawansa Thera, Archbishop of Colombo, His Eminence Malcolm Cardinal Ranjith, General Secretary of the Samagi Jana Balawegaya, Ranjith Madhuma Bandara, former JVP MP Sunil Handunetti and Vasantha Samarasinghe, trade unions and several other factions. What's more, former cabinet ministers Vimal Weerawansa, Uday Gammampila as well as Minister Vasudeva Nanayakkara also supported the petitions via affidavits. The petitioners called for a ruling which deems the 40% share transfer of the Yugadani power plant to the US company New Fortress Energy violates the fundamental rights of the people. But the petitions were unanimously rejected, sans consideration by the Supreme Court. Now then, following the sacking of ministers Udaya Gammanpila and Wimal Weerawansa by President Gotabaya Rajapaksa yesterday, 11 parties aligned to the government held a media briefing today, where they expressed their disappointment in the move. Speaking at the event, former Minister Weerawansa pledged to reject any ministerial portfolio under the current president and accused Finance Minister Basil Rajapaksa of attempting to trap Sri Lanka under US influence.
The sacking of former ministers Udaya Gammanpila and Wimal Weerawansa by President Gotabaya Rajapaksa yesterday, a media briefing was held today by a group of 11 parties aligned with the government to protest the move. Speaking at the briefing, Minister of Water Supply Vasudeva Nanayakkara announced that he will boycott cabinet meetings in protest as well.
රාජයේ නායකත්වය මේ දෙපළ ඒ අමති දූරවලින් ඉවත් කිරීමෙන් සිදු කළේ වරදක් කියන එක මුළු රටම කාණ්ඩෙන් කියනවා. ඒ ගැන යුක්තියක් මේ රජය ඉටු කරන තුරු මට මගේ අමාත්‍ය ධූරයේ කටයුතු ඉටු කළ නොහැකි. මම අමාත්‍ය ධූරයේ කටයුතු වලින් ඉවත් වෙන කැබිනට් මණ්ඩලයට යන්නේ නැහැ. මම ඉල්ලනවා මේ වැරදි තීරණය ගැන යුක්තියක්.
Meanwhile, former Minister Wimal Weerawansa, who also spoke at the media briefing, accused Finance Minister Basil Rajapaksa of being the root cause of the country's current crises.
අපි වක් කියන්න ඕනේ
අපි දෙන දේ කාලා වෙන දේ බලාගෙන හිටපු අය නා. එහෙම අය නම් අපි වගේ කියන්න ඕන. ආරාධනයක් කරොත් ආය ආණ්ඩුවට එන්නේ කියලා. නෑ ඉතින් අගමැතිතුමා මම දන්න විදිහට මේ ගතු තීරණයට අගමැතිතුමාගේ කැමැත්තක් නෑ. එතුමා දන්නවා දේශපාලනය ගැන. ආය හැමදూరుය බාරගන්න කියලා කියයිද පුතුමා? නෑ නෑ එහෙම කිව්වත් කිසි ලෙස කිව්වත් මේ ජනාධිපතිවරයාට කිසිම ඇමති ධූරයක වගකීම් දරන්න මම නම් මොහොතකටවත් ලෑස්ති නෑ. දැන් මට අමුට කියන්න පුළුවන්. බැසිල් රාජපක්ෂට තියෙන එක කොන්ත්‍රාත්තුවක්. ඔහුගේ විශ්‍රාම ජීවිතය ගෙවෙන්නේ ඇමරිකා එක්සත් ජනපදයේ. මේ ආර්ථික අර්බුදය තාම දැවැන්ත ආපදාවක් බවට පත් වෙන්න ඉඩ හැරලා ඇමරිකානු උපාය මාර්ගයට මේ රට ගොදුරු කරන එක තමයි බැසිල් රාජපක්ෂගේ කොන්ත්‍රාත්තුව.
The Attorney General filed an appeal before the Supreme Court against the acquittal of former Defence Secretary Hemasiri Fernando and former IGP Pujit Jayasundara. They were acquitted recently from the cases filed against them for failing to prevent these Sunday attacks, despite there being intelligence of a pending attack. The AG argues that the decision taken by the Colombo High Court trial at bar to acquit the duo is faulty. Therefore, the Attorney General is seeking a Supreme Court order which nullifies the said decision. Welcome back. This is First at 9. Now, the Colombo Bourse ended in the green territory today as the index closed 0.72% higher. The all-share price index gained 80.83 points to end at 11,243.49. The S&P SL20 index of more liquid stocks, meanwhile, closed 54.45 points higher to close at 3,819.44. The volume of shares stood at 77,043,938, while the market turnover was 3 billion rupees. In the meantime, the Sri Lankan rupee continues to be at 202.99 cents against the US dollar. Now let's take a look at how the Sri Lankan rupee fared against other major currencies during the day. And that's it from all of us here at First at 9. Thanks for watching. Bye-bye.